We're joined by West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin. Senator, good to have you here.
Good to be with you, Margaret.
In person. You've known Joe Biden for a very long time. You've known Donald Trump. What does Biden need to do to reverse this trend?
Well, I think basically speaking to the American people on what has been accomplished, what they want to accomplish, mistakes they've made, and how they're going to correct them. People just want to know the truth. You know, if you made a mistake, say, hey, we made a mistake. We tried something and it didn't work out. I think they moved too far to the left. They need to come back to the center or center left. That's where America is. America is between the centers, center left, center right. That's where most of the voters are, and that's where the decisions on who's going to be elected, that's where it's going to happen. It's not going to happen from the extremes, but we're playing off of the extremes. That's what people are just worn out. Enough is enough.
Well, and you've said enough for you. You are leaving Congress.
Right. I've tried everything I could. I'm going on my 14th year, and I've done everything. I can tell you, we cannot fix it.
Well, you haven't tried everything. You know that question.
Well, we cannot fix it in Washington. It won't be fixed because the business model, and that's what my daughter Heather and I put together, Americans Together.
Right.
And the reason for that is trying to give people hope in the middle that they have a voice and a place to go.
Well, you said you're trying to travel the country and suss out this moderate group. Where do you direct them? What do you have them drive towards a nomination?
This is not a short game. This is a long game, right? If you're going to get, it's a character of the person you send to Washington, who you're voting for and within your state or your district. And if that person has the character to where they put their country before their party, they put their service before themselves, all these types of things, and people can detect that. But they have to get that person in the game. And right now, with the gerrymandering, the way it's controlled, you get 380 to 390 districts already cooked. You've got the whole thing as far as the primaries, how you could change those to more of a majority primary, an open primary, if you will. It gets a person doesn't have the political backing maybe or the financing, but has the best character and the best ideas, gives them a chance. There's many ways it can be done, but it has to be really pushed from the outside. The business model in Washington is too darn good for the Democrat and Republican parties. They're doing too good. They're getting rewarded for bad behavior, and too much money's coming in.
You're trying to push President Biden towards the middle.
Love to.
You've said he's been pulled so far to the left, to the extreme left, as far as the liberal, makes no sense at all. It's not the person we thought was going to bring the country together. That's pretty harshly critical of him.
Well, I mean,
it's
constructive criticism. Let me make very clear. I love my country too much to vote for Donald Trump. I love my country too much, and I think it would be very detrimental to my country. I want to make sure that people have a choice, but also understanding the person with a character and this and that. So we have to see what happens on Super Tuesday. I think by then you're going to know who's in the game, where we stand.
By March, and you expect representatives to enter the race?
I think that we'll find out. You just have to find out what's going on. If there's a movement for third party, I think is what you're asking about. Can that movement make a difference? I'm not going to be a spoiler, never have been and never will be. But people want options or they want change. So you got to see what comes. And by then, I think things will hopefully sort itself out.
So you're not closing the door on running yourself? You get asked this question all the time.
I'm going to do everything I can to save my country. And I'll do whatever it takes. I'll help whoever, and I'll support whoever that I think can best help this country come back to the common sense, sensible middle, which is center left, center right working together with a majority. You can't govern from the extremes.
You said the president could fix mistakes. What's the mistake you think he's making?
Well, I think the border. The border has to be fixed. And you know what? If Congress...
There are talks in the Senate to do just that.
I know.
Are you on board with what the White House
Margaret,
is
I agree
proposing?
with you. We were told before Christmas, we're going to stay here and get this done. And all of a sudden, okay, you can go home now because we're getting some language done now. We're writing, putting pen to it. We're going to come back, and as soon as we come back, that was last week, we'll have something. Now, this is the second week. This is the greatest crisis we're facing right now is the border, and it's dangerous. And if Congress cannot do its job because the perfect is the enemy of the good, it's just not perfect enough for the Democrats or Republicans, or it's gone too far or not far enough, the president has to step forward and declare an emergency. I don't believe there should be any more paroles at the border until we can get a handle on what's going on. And it's just extremely bad right now.
We have to take a break, but I want to follow up on what you just said, because I think you just said the president needs to take executive action. So let's let you finish that thought on the other side of this commercial break. Stay with us.
The Nation is brought to you by Charles Schwab. Own your tomorrow.
Welcome Welcome back to Face the Nation. We want to pick up where we left off with Senator Manchin. Senator, before the break, you were saying you think the president needs to do more on the border. The president did say this weekend he wants to make major changes. He has negotiations going on. Are you saying put aside that deal and just take an executive action?
Put a deadline. If it doesn't happen this week, this is such a crisis, and it's a dangerous crisis at the border. The president might have to take executive actions, declaring a crisis, national crisis at the border, and do what needs to be done to shut that border down and secure it until we can get a handle, or until the legislature can come to an agreement. But leaving it open, thinking that we're all going to be kumbaya and it's all going to come together, is not the prudent course to take, I believe.
So you think he needs to get more directly involved, because this is what Republicans say has to get done to unlock Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan aid.
I'm just saying, by the crisis at the border is the greatest crisis we face in America, the dangerous crisis that we're facing now. And I believe very strongly that border needs to be secured, and to secure it, close it down, if you can't get a pathway that legislature agrees on.
Yeah.
I think this week would be a deadline, because we were told before Christmas it would be done.
Right.
We were told come back, it would be done. Now the second week of coming back and it's still not done, and who knows?
You are on the Armed Services Committee. As of this morning, Secretary of Defense is still in the hospital. Right. We learned this week he's receiving treatment for prostate cancer. He's been in the hospital since January 1st. The president didn't find out about the cancer diagnosis until we were told January 9th.
Right.
A Democratic Congressman, Seth Moulton, former Marine, says this is a breakdown in the chain of command. Austin should be fired. Do you agree?
There's definitely been a breakdown. We need to find out more on the facts. We will this week. We're supposed to be briefed on that this week to find exactly what happened. But let me just say, my prayers are with Lloyd Austin and his family for his speedy recovery and full recovery. Here's a man who's dedicated his entire life to the defense of our country. If a mistake was made, we can fix that. Was there a breakdown and basically we were left rudderless? I don't believe so, but we'll find out. Decisions can be made later, but you don't change right now, and you don't throw a person out that has dedicated his entire life and done a good job of giving everything he has to it. He said he made a mistake. He shouldn't have done it. Okay?
President Biden said it was a lapse in judgment.
Most certainly.
But in terms of national security, the fact that there seems to be this confusion or lack of communication with the White House by the Pentagon, does that trouble you?
Well, let me just say this. We saw the attacks on the Houthis back. Okay, that's been a coalition being put together. That took coordination. Somebody's still operating, okay, even in this lapse that we see. But before I'm going to draw fire on that or make a decision, I want to see the rest of the facts. And is corrections being made? And has it been there for some time and it just happened to come up at this time when a person who's very private made a mistake, thought he had a very simple procedure, or it wasn't as serious as it turned out to be. So we can fix all that. But here again, his health and well-being is what I'm most concerned about, and his dedication to our country. I think we owe something to make sure we have the facts before we put politics. Politics is always going to go for someone's head, always does. And this toxic atmosphere is what people don't like anymore.
Yeah.
So just have some civility to how we handle ourselves and our concerns we have for people.
We are definitely for civility. Senator, you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you, Margaret.
We'll be right back. Today marks 100 days since Hamas led a brutal attack on Israel. Our Charlie D'Agata reports on the growing conflict in the Middle East.
Just days after the massive U.S.-led Red Sea assault involving American F-18 fighter jets and British Typhoons taking off from Cyprus, Houthi militants carried out drills in Yemen yesterday, less a serious military flex than a show of defiance. Former Major General Amos Yadlin was the head of Israel's military intelligence and a former fighter pilot who flew several missions behind enemy lines.
I have a suspicion that it's not enough, to destroy the capabilities. It may affect the intentions.
The very escalation the U.S. had sought to avoid, a direct military confrontation with Iranian-backed adversaries.
4 months into this conflict that started over the tiny strip of land that is Gaza has now expanded to a more global arena, including here on the Red Sea.
Retaliation for weeks of Houthi attacks on commercial ships in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. 100 days into that war, the fight rages on. Almost 24,000 people have been killed, according to Hamas health officials, many children among them. Winter now piling misery on the hundreds of thousands of displaced residents, hungry, and aid agencies say some facing starvation. Amid growing international condemnation that the toll is too high, Israeli officials say the world needs reminding. Hamas started this fight. This morning, thousands gathered in Tel Aviv for 100 seconds of silence, including the families of those still held hostage, not knowing whether their loved ones are even still alive.
Amid increasing pressure for even a temporary ceasefire, Margaret, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the nation last night saying, "We will continue this war until the end. We're on a path to victory, and we won't stop until we achieve victory."
Charlie D'Agata in Israel. We're joined now by Admiral John Kirby of the White House National Security Council. It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
We received that report about 2 Navy SEALs missing off the coast of Somalia. They were attempting to board a small ship believed to be carrying weapons from Iran to Yemen. What is the status?
As far as we know, that search is still ongoing for those 2 sailors that are in the water, and we hope to get some updated information today. But we're obviously watching this very closely.
But this is directly related to what is going on.
This was not related to the strikes in Yemen. This was normal interdiction operations that we've been conducting for some time to try to disrupt that flow of weapon supplies to Yemen. So it's not related to the strikes that we took against the Houthis.
But still, in this region, the Houthis, as you just mentioned there, say the motivation here is they're trying to get back at Israel's allies. That's a justification they're using for attacking some of these ships. Does the U.S. assess that these coalition strikes will deter the Houthis, or are you bracing for retaliation and an open-ended conflict?
I think it'd be Pollyannish for us to think that there couldn't or may not be some sort of retaliatory strike by the Houthis. We're watching this very, very closely. We've taken the requisite necessary precautions in the region to make sure we're ready for that if that should occur. These strikes were meant to disrupt and degrade their ability to conduct these strikes. And so we think that we had good effect on that. We're still assessing the battle damage assessment of those strikes, but we think we had good effect. We'll see what happens. The Houthis have a choice to make here now, Margaret. And the right choice is to stop these reckless attacks. And no matter what they say, this is not about punishing Israel. I mean, one of the ships they took a shot at yesterday was Panamanian flagged, and it was taking Russian oil. It had nothing to do with Israel.
So it may be an open-ended conflict. We don't know if deterrence has been established.
Nobody wants a conflict with the Houthis. We're not looking for a conflict with Yemen here. We're trying to get these attacks to stop.
So you used to work very closely with the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin.
Yes.
And as we were just talking about, everyone is hoping he pulls through this battle with cancer healthy and strong. But why is he still in the hospital? If he's able to work, why does he still need to be at Walter Reed?
Well, again, I'm not his physician, so I want to be careful. But my understanding is that he's following his doctor's orders and in consultation with their views in terms of what kind of additional care he needs. And we'll see, when he can get released. But obviously, they still feel like he may need some additional care. I understand that part of that is just physical therapy.
So, okay. Does the president talk to him on a daily basis? Because I think one of the things that surprised a lot of people, knowing what a tinderbox the Middle East is, Europe is, and the concern about China, was how infrequently there was direct contact between the White House and the Defense Secretary for that entire period of time at the end of December through January.
There's routine, regular communications between the president and the Secretary of Defense, as well as the Secretary of State. And normally, like for instance, some of the strikes we took on Christmas Day, Christmas night, and then a few days later were pre-approved. Secretary Austin was part of that discussion. He was part of the discussion from his hospital room when we took these strikes against these Houthi sites just a couple of nights ago. I mean, he's actively involved and engaged. And I think it's important for people to remember that the cabinet officials don't have to sit and talk every single day to make every decision. A lot of the work that gets done in national security is done at the staff level.
Right, but there is a chain of command here.
Of course
And
there
the
is.
commander-in-chief didn't know that his defense secretary was this ill.
And that's a problem. And the president has spoken to that. That is not the way it's supposed to be. It's certainly something we need to get more answers to. And the Pentagon's investigating this, and we'll see what comes out of that. But that is not the way the process is supposed to work. That is right.
You know, as we acknowledged here, it's been 100 days since that Hamas attack on Israel that sparked where we are now. Does the U.S. need to press Israel harder to move into the low-intensity conflict they say they intend to move towards?
I can tell you, and Secretary Blinken just came from the region, that we have been talking to them intensely about a transition to low-intensity operations. We believe it's the right time for that transition, and we're talking to them about doing that. Now, they have done some precursory steps to try to kind of get to that point. They're pulling some troops out. They're relying a little less on airstrikes. But we believe that, look, any military campaign, you go through phases. And the next logical phase here, as they have put pressure on Hamas leadership, is to get to lower intensity operations, more targeted, more precise raids, less airstrikes. We believe it's time to make that transition, and we have had that conversation with them.
Time to make that transition because it's now a detriment to U.S. national security to be giving them cover for this long?
Because it's the right thing to do in this military campaign against Hamas. They have put pressure on leadership. They have gone after that leadership. They have been able to go after some of the resourcing and infrastructure that Hamas uses to conduct these attacks. We're not saying let your foot up off the gas completely and don't keep going after Hamas. It's still a viable threat. They have every right and responsibility to go after that. It's just that we believe the time is coming here very, very soon for a transition to this lower intensity phase.
Right. Because, you know, even Democratic senators like Chris Van Hollen have said, the quote in Axios is, at every juncture, the Netanyahu government has given Biden the finger. That the White House is just being told, we don't care.
We have had intense conversations with the Israelis. We know that those conversations have had effects, Margaret. I mean, they went into North Gaza with a much smaller force than they were originally planned to because we gave them some advice about what our experiences were in places like Mosul and Fallujah. We've seen them now establish humanitarian corridors. We've seen them drop leaflets telling people where to go, where not to go. I mean, that's basically telegraphing your punches, and not a lot of modern militaries would do that. I'm not saying it's perfect, and we're certainly not walking away from the need to reduce civilian casualties and get more humanitarian aid in. It's getting in a couple hundred trucks a day, not enough. And we're going to keep that. We're going to keep having those conversations with them.
Thank you so much for coming and joining us in studio.
Yes,
we'll be back in a moment. We go back now to the Republican presidential primary contest and candidate Asa Hutchinson, who is joining us from Des Moines. You were, sir, a two-term governor. You helped found Homeland Security. You ran the DEA. You were a member of Congress. But Donald Trump has remade your party. How do you define who your supporters are?
Well, first of all, you're correct. He has redefined the Republican Party, and not in a good way. And whenever you look at what I'm trying to do is draw attention to the fact that Donald Trump is a weak candidate for us going into the general election. I think the CBS poll that you cited today reflects that. The one person that ought to enjoy that poll is Joe Biden, with Trump having that kind of a lead in the primary. My responsibility and other candidates is to take on the front runner if you don't agree that he's the right one. We've been doing that, and there might be a short-term price for that, but long-term, fear-mongering and grievances only take you so far. And so that is the sign of a weak candidate as you go further into this election year. So the voice is critically important to alert people that we can't mislead our voters and say January 6th was somehow a patriotic act. It was an attack on our Capitol, the rule of law, and Congress. And we cannot buy into that misleading by Donald Trump.
So, sir, our CBS polling shows 81% of Republican primary voters say they agree with the statement that immigrants are poisoning the blood of the country. What do you think of that statement, and why is that resonating with self-identified Republican voters?
Well, because there's incredible concern about the border. As you talk to voters here in Iowa, their number one concern is the economy. Equal to that is border security. And so I don't like his inflammatory language. I would never use that. Immigrants are important to our country, but we have to have the legal process, and people are upset with the Biden administration and the porous border. That's why I can make the case effectively that I'm the only one running for president who's actually had that responsibility of securing the border. That resonates as well. And I would rather talk about it in terms of what we need to do versus the pejorative rhetoric that really misleads people and hurts people.
Fentanyl is driving one of the deadliest drug crises in this country's history. And most of that, I think you know, comes in through those legal ports of entry into the United States. But most of your competitors are squarely blaming China, squarely blaming Mexico. They do have roles here, as you know. But how would you deal with the overall crisis in America?
Well, you have to do it by partnering with Mexico to go after the cartels who are responsible for bringing the fentanyl in. They should be declared foreign terrorist organizations. But your point is very well taken. They're smuggling that through the ports of entries. And I saw Senator Manchin talking about we need to close down the border. What's he talking about? Is he talking about the ports of entry or between the ports of entry? Mm-hmm. And surely you don't want to shut down all of our commerce. It would hurt America if we did that. And so we got to use better technologies, and you've got to partner with Mexico and use economic pressure to accomplish that. And then we cannot neglect the importance of educating our young people about the risk of buying a Percocet pill on the street and how that could be laced with fentanyl. Yeah. We've got to increase our drug treatment resources. All of that's a part of my plan based upon my experience as head of the DEA.
When you say economic pressure on Mexico, are you talking about shutting down temporarily transit between the two, as President Biden had to do in December, or are you talking about putting tariffs on Mexico like Donald Trump says he wants to do?
Well, neither. We're going to be returning manufacturing back from China, and the president can help lead and say some of that's going to wind up in Mexico, and our economic partnership's important. But as president, I will discourage that return of manufacturing to Mexico if they don't support the rule of law and partner with us. So there's a different levels of economic pressure. And sure, I think that we have to take strong measures to get their attention to help us. But I think you can do that without hurting American businesses that rely upon that cross-border commerce.
All right. Asa Hutchinson, thank you for joining us today. And we turn now to Governor and Nikki Haley supporter Chris Sununu, who joins us from Newfields, New Hampshire. Good to have you back with us.
You bet.
So, Governor, Donald Trump won New Hampshire's primary in 2016. It legitimized his campaign. It helped launch him to the presidency. He's leading again in the New Hampshire polls. So is this really just about Nikki Haley potentially coming in second place?
No, not at all. Look, I mean, the media has told the world that Donald Trump was going to win every state and run away with this. It wasn't even going to be a race. It obviously is a race. Nikki Haley is the only candidate surging in Iowa and in New Hampshire. The fact that if Nikki can post a strong second here, that's great, and we're going to do that. But now there's even a chance of kind of shattering the presumptions that Donald Trump's going to run away with this, and that happens right here in New Hampshire. She can challenge him to win this state, go into her home state with nearly a month of campaigning there. She knows how to win there, and that again just breaks down this assumption by the whole country that it's Trump's to be had. So by doing that, you kind of hit a reset, if you will, on the entire campaign narrative and put Nikki right at the top of the heap.
So you said recently that if your candidate doesn't win the nomination, you would still support the party nominee. But back in June, when you said you personally decided not to run for president, you said if Trump wins, Republicans will lose again. He didn't deliver on his promises to drain the swamp, secure the border, instill fiscal responsibility. He has numerous investigations. He's peddling conspiracy theories. So why do you no longer have such a strong conviction?
I absolutely do. Look,
but you would support him if he's the nominee.
I would support him, but yeah, I never said I wouldn't support him. We never said we wouldn't support the Republican nominee, but understand he's the weakest candidate to go up against Donald Trump. Yeah, but I didn't say I wasn't going to support him. Republicans are going to support him. This would be a nail-biter race come November. With Nikki Haley at the top, she wins by 10 points. It's a fundamentally different argument because you get the Senate, you get the House seats, you get the governorships, you get all the way down the ticket. The Republicans win. Donald Trump is simply the weakest candidate. And so, again, that's the opportunity that Nikki brings to the table.
Okay. I'm sorry, you're saying you would still support the weakest candidate even though it would hurt your party in down ballot races just to be consistent?
No, Margaret, we're talking about the general election here.
Yeah.
Trump versus Biden, right? You think I'm going to vote for Joe Biden? With what he's done to this country, with what he's done with inflation and crushed middle American families? I think Trump's the weakest nominee and would have a tough time beating Biden for sure. But we're going to support the Republican nominee. But at the end of the day, that's why Nikki Haley's surging. That's why so many people are getting behind. That's why, again, you can sit, I tell the folks in Iowa and New Hampshire, you can sit on the couch and wait to see what happens, or you can go caucus for Nikki Haley in Iowa. You can make sure you vote in New Hampshire. The higher the voter turnout, the better chance there is of defeating Donald Trump. And that happens. Don't wait for a court case. Don't wait for external factors that aren't going to happen. That's going to happen at the ballot box. And that's the opportunity over the next 10 days to turn this entire narrative around that Trump's just going to run away with this thing. Nikki's the opportunity for the Republican Party.
So 2022 was the most dangerous year for overdoses in New Hampshire since 2017, which was the same year Donald Trump called your state a drug-infested den. What do you think, on the serious matter of addiction in this country, what is happening in your state that has had addiction specifically now with fentanyl only continue to be a problem through these administrations?
Well, yeah, again, you're looking at small data. Since 2017, fentanyl-driven deaths in this country have exceeded 60% increase. We've gone down. We've actually gone down. And our numbers will be lower than 22 even again this year. So our model is actually breaking the national trends. Our model is one where we provide rural access to care. We're not just pumping more money into old systems. We've rebuilt our entire system around it. We used to be one of the number one, number two in terms of drug and fentanyl-driven deaths in the country. We're now around 23, 24. So again, we have a lot of work to do. The entire country does. But understand the entire country has skyrocketed where we've actually gone down and broken that mold. I think we have a terrific model here. It's working. It's going to take time. You then implement that around mental health services as well. You implement that around all the other services. The majority of services in this country are focused on the inner cities. It's wrong. It's not the best way to do it. You have to have that rural access to care, especially around fentanyl and overdoses and xylazine, all these other new drugs that are kind of coming onto the market. We've been on the forefront of that stuff.
Governor, we wish you luck with that. Thank you for your time this morning. We'll be right back. That's it for us today. Thank you for watching. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.